Today's event has generated widespread public resonance, once again raising key issues facing the judicial system. Who was the main character of this story, a cruel psychopathic manipulator or an innocent victim of an insidious criminal? The desire for a bohemian lifestyle became the protagonist's life goal. Some believe it allows you to achieve everything, even escape death. However, the story of today's heroes turned out to be so mysterious that it becomes obvious, neither wealth nor influence can save you from a terrible fate, if such a fate is predetermined. Sophie Buñuel was born on July 28, 1957 in Paris, France. From the first days of her life, she was raised in an atmosphere of luxury and prosperity, in a respected French family closely connected with the world of fashion and cinema. It was a period of true bohemia, where representatives of high society gathered. Sophie possessed extraordinary talent, artistry, and a go-getter character, so she developed in this direction and built a successful career as a film producer. Her face became recognizable in the country, embodying success. However, she did not neglect her personal life and family happiness. By 1991, Sophie married film producer Daniel Toscan and became Sophie Toscan du Plantier. Their acquaintance was not accidental, both circulated in cinematographic circles and were worthy of each other. The couple embodied the luxury and wealth of that era. This star union attracted considerable media attention. For both celebrities, it became a logical continuation of career achievements to move together with Sophie's son from a previous marriage to a luxurious mansion. In the eyes of everyone who knew this woman well, she was a strong and energetic personality, capable of resolutely defending her beliefs and achieving goals with incredible persistence. Only the innermost circle knew Sophie as a soft, kind, calm, modest and loving mother for whom her son Pierre-Louis was the center of the universe. Sophie created a glamorous image of a radiant fashionista. Her everyday life was filled with endless filming, flashes of cameras and constant attention of journalists associated with television and the film industry. Over the years, the woman increasingly sought solitude, peace and family life, away from the relentless attention of outsiders and fans. Therefore, in the early 90s, Sophie began to visit her country house in Dunmanus, West Cork, Ireland more and more often. She often rested here with her family as a child. Cork has become quite a popular place among wealthy artists and writers inspired by the picturesque local scenery. The hustle and bustle of Paris exhausted the woman so much that for solitude she chose this quiet, cozy cottage in the wilderness. She acquired this cottage in 1993. Unlike the usual amenities, even some benefits caused difficulties here. The dwelling was located in a remote area, so getting there was quite difficult. But most importantly for Sophie, this childhood corner was the only place capable of guaranteeing isolation and peace. After arriving here, the troubles did not end, because in this area there were problems with electricity and heating. Although not always, but interruptions happened. However, this was not of great importance for rest, restoration of emotional strength and the search for inspiration. The local landscapes and the charm of the province, which evoked memories of a carefree childhood, were most attractive. When Sophie first found herself here after a long break, she was fascinated by the beauty of nature. The woman fell in love with these places again, and from that moment on she could not think about any inconvenience. Sophie preferred to go into seclusion here in the summer, but always returned home. In Paris, she described this period as a time of restoring mental and emotional strength, usually setting off here alone. This was the case in December 1996, when 39-year-old Sophie Toscan decided to go to Ireland to recharge and familiarize herself with movie scripts before the coming New Year holidays. She arrived in the city alone and secluded herself in her home in a quiet area. During these moments, the woman was not a recluse, mostly communicating with neighbors and acquaintances from distant childhood who lived here. She was seen in the city more than once. Sophie was familiar with many local residents, spoke with everyone at ease and never tried to put herself above. Thanks to this, many perceived her not as a lady from the bohemian Parisian environment, but as the long-time good Sophie, a girl who grew up among them. She communicated amicably with everyone and avoided topics related to work and private life, so that all this would not instantly overgrow with rumors. On the eve of Christmas, a neighbor decided to visit Sophie at her home on December 23, 1996. Around 10 a.m., she went to visit to chat and discuss plans for the upcoming holidays, as well as have a cup of tea in the afternoon when she was free. But instead of a pleasant conversation, she found her friend in the mud near the house with no signs of life. The woman immediately informed the police that a mutilated body was lying near Sophie's home. It was so disfigured that the neighbor was not even sure if it was Sophie Toscan herself. When the Irish police arrived at the call, they were faced with a creepy, bloody sight. The head was shattered beyond recognition, but the victim's identity was confirmed. She was identified as Sophie Toscan. At the time of the murder, the 39-year-old woman was still in her nightgown, and on her feet were boots. The bed in the bedroom was rumpled. It looked as if in the middle of the night or early in the morning something had awakened the woman, so she was forced to go outside, hastily putting on outdoor shoes. Near the body, a probable murder weapon was found, a large concrete block covered in blood. Bloody footprints led towards the entrance gate, in the lock of which keys were still sticking out. 2 wine glasses were found in the woman's home, standing in the dish drainer. Detectives suggested that the attack took place outside the house, as there were no signs of a struggle inside. Local law enforcement rarely encountered such horrific crimes in these parts. The small local police station did not have experienced experts at its disposal. So they had to wait for forensic experts to arrive from a larger city, who had to meticulously examine the crime scene and the victim's body. Specialists of the necessary qualifications reached this remote area only a day later. All this time, Sophie's body lay in the open air. During this period it rained and it was cold. She was simply covered with plastic bags, but the harsh weather led to the destruction of some important evidence. And finally, a full-fledged investigation began. First of all, attention was drawn to the clear signs of struggle on Sophie Toscan's hands. However, even their nature was difficult to assess due to the time that had passed. The rain washed away most of the blood, and the preserved traces also did not make it possible to accurately establish the time of the woman's death. There was very little evidence. Forensic experts painstakingly reconstructed the picture of what happened. Obviously, Sophie died from a blow to the head with a blunt object. Barely noticeable bloodstains were found on the gates and the entrance gate. Unfortunately, a significant part of them was destroyed by the downpour. Given that Sophie was wearing boots, most of the blood was on the outdoor side, so it was assumed that the attack began there. Inside the house, they still could not find any signs of a struggle, and the 2 wine glasses standing in the dish drainer were not recognized as a reliable find, because they were already clean and it was unclear when exactly they could have appeared. Perhaps the woman used them at different moments alone. Several DNA samples were collected at the crime scene. Unfortunately, in 1996, testing and profile matching capabilities were extremely limited. This important clue was not properly evaluated, but was stored in the archive. Detectives tried to reconstruct the chronology of events from the moment Sophie Toscan arrived in Ireland. It was established that she arrived on December 21st. On the same day, the woman was noticed while shopping in grocery stores. She seemed to stroll carefree, looking around the surroundings. The woman talked with several local residents. She was friendly and willingly talked with everyone who knew her well. One of the store owners she visited that day recalled that a man in a black coat and hat followed Sophie into the store. According to witnesses, the stranger watched the heroine of the story and left immediately after Sophie left the store. It seemed as if he was following her. It was very noticeable. The suspicious type didn't even buy anything. He was not interested in the goods at all. No one else paid attention to this person. At least on December 21st. On December 22nd, the woman went for a walk along the path to the castle located nearby on a rocky ledge. She walked along the path from which the view of the ruins opened, reached the observation deck and spent some time there, admiring the charming landscapes. Returning, Sophie stopped by the city and went to a local pub, where she ordered tea and talked with several visitors who were her neighbors and often visited the establishment. Eventually, the woman returned to her home and did not go out anymore. Only around midnight did she contact her husband Daniel, who was in Paris. In a series of testimonies, it was possible to clarify the time intervals. The body was found at 10 a.m. the next day, so the attack occurred between midnight and that moment. Given the brutality of the crime, it was assumed that the killer should be sought among the woman's closest circle. This is a typical development of events. In the vast majority of cases, the criminal turns out to be a person well known to the victim. The first suspect immediately became the victim's husband, Daniel Toscan. There were rumors about the disorder in their relationship. When the police delved into the secrets of the family, it turned out that the tension arose due to the husband's marital infidelity, and the infidelity was of a constant nature. Sophie found out about this and wanted to break off contact with him. She stated this even before leaving for Ireland. As it turned out, her attempt to escape from the hustle and bustle and prepare for the holidays was also a way to unwind, relieve tension before breaking up with her husband. Given that it was about star and very wealthy persons, the divorce was supposed to be complicated and high-profile. Money and power have always been a strong motive for murder, but Daniel was quickly excluded from the list of suspects. The man insisted that during the period of Sophie's murder he was in France. This was effortlessly confirmed by dozens of witnesses, providing him with a reliable alibi. When journalists learned about the tragic death of a famous person, numerous speculations began that overshadowed the festive mood of all the local residents of this settlement. The once quiet town turned into a place of invasion of reporters eager for sensations. Of course, this greatly interfered with the progress of the investigation. It shook the local community and could throw them off track. Even more complications arose due to the fact that the bloody event occurred in a town with too small a police force, so the resources necessary for the investigation were simply lacking. A lot of time was spent checking all theories and false statements. Already at this stage, the entire local community came under suspicion. Detectives assumed that the killer was well acquainted not only with Sophie herself, but also with the area, so he managed to act imperceptibly. This fully explained why no one raised the alarm, not even the dogs of local residents. The animals simply knew the smell of the criminal perfectly, and he himself managed to pass so as not to disturb anyone. Since then, attention has been drawn to a man named Ian Bailey. He was born in Manchester in 1957, was a rather versatile personality, but with a difficult past and a dubious reputation. In his youth, Ian became an independent journalist, ran his own business, worked in many places. He moved to Ireland in 1991. At the time of the murder, Ian lived in a house with his lover and was known for problems with the local police. Together with a partner in 1991, he founded a business, but later troubles began. Ian Bailey became a figurant of several alarming incidents. After the attack on a business partner, differences with the authorities led to the fact that in the same year he was convicted of assault and even imprisoned for a short time. Ian was known to the local police for his irascibility and aggressiveness, due to previous cases of domestic violence against his partner, which even led to her hospitalization, but he was not jailed for this. Ian underwent a psychiatric examination. Experts found that he suffered from a narcissistic disorder. The man was impulsive and cruel. A whole complex of mental deviations was suspected. Ian was described as a person with an extremely overestimated self-esteem and alcohol addiction. All this became a catalyst for spontaneous and uncontrolled outbursts of rage. He himself attributed his behavior to the painful divorce that occurred shortly before moving to Cork. Ian turned out to be a suitable suspect for other reasons as well. His dwelling was located a few minutes' walk from the victim's house, which was in sight, so it was not difficult for him to approach her imperceptibly. During this period, he lived with his girlfriend named Julie Thomas. She was also one of the residents of this town. Interestingly, on December 23, almost immediately after the discovery of Sophie's body, this couple arrived at the crime scene one of the first. And they possessed many details of the crime that they could not know about. The couple tried to find out additional information from the police. Allegedly for the preparation of a report, because he pretended to be an independent journalist working on a sensation. But he was not allowed to enter the crime scene. The police stressed that the couple behaved extremely insistently, even illegally entered the territory of the house. When the man was checked and his criminal episodes from the past were revealed, it seemed that he was not a reporter, but a criminal trying to find out at what stage the investigation was. Despite the opposition of the authorities, Ian managed to make several unpleasant reports. This morbid persistence regarding the investigation only intensified police suspicions about him. The articles were stuffed with inappropriate details and speculation about the personal life of the deceased. Her relatives were shocked by the unscrupulousness and cynicism that permeated every line of the journalist's posts. After the appearance of these publications, a wave of indignation arose. Sophie Toscan's relatives even officially refuted the statements of the independent journalist, appearing on television. They were convinced that the man deliberately tarnished the name of the murdered woman in order to become famous and profit from it, and did not support the opinion of law enforcement officers about his possible involvement and treated Ian with suspicion. When the police talked to him, he denied that he was familiar with the deceased at all, but not everyone shared this version. People from Sophie's inner circle who lived here and knew her from childhood were sure that they were acquainted, and considered Ian involved in the crime. The mass media, which readily picked up the idea of the journalist's involvement in the murder, made a considerable contribution to this. He himself rejected the blame, referring to his notes and some informant who, according to his version, provided him with valuable information about the crime, but refused to name him. The key characters in the man's posts were not only Sophie Toscan, but also some criminal from her inner circle who hired a killer. He was convinced that this was done by one of the woman's former lovers or even her husband with whom a divorce was brewing. While dealing with the refutations of this lie, a truly valuable testimony from an anonymous person appeared. A local resident said that on December 23, around 3 a.m., he saw an unknown man near the house of the deceased. According to the description, he coincided with the man whom the owner of the local store saw in his establishment and who was pursuing Sophie. But interestingly, this anonymous witness gave a more detailed description. And it exactly matched the appearance of Ian Bailey. A few days later, the independent scandalous reporter was detained and taken to the police station for interrogation. Finding himself in the department, he behaved very nervously, made a lot of noise and threatened to deal with arbitrariness. The detectives immediately noticed suspicious scratches on the man's face and hands. In this regard, he said that a Christmas tree fell on him when he cut it down in the forest. Law enforcement officials doubted this version and took pictures of these marks, which caused even more indignation from Ian. The man's behavior seemed too aggressive, but he attributed it to his mental disorders. The suspect continued to deny that he was acquainted with Sophie Toscan, insisting on his version. He believed that one of her ex-lovers could have hired a killer to murder her. The suspect made loud statements that it was not him who should be interrogated, but Daniel Toscan, but the authorities were convinced that the criminal was a local resident who knew the town well. This explained how he was able to get to Sophie's house and leave no traces. Ian rightly noted that forensic experts arrived at the crime scene too late, so the traces were simply washed away by the rain, and belonging to the city had nothing to do with it. He called the initial examination of the murder scene a manifestation of negligence, and accused the police of trying to make him a scapegoat. Detectives spoke with Ian's acquaintances, and they said they saw him on the evening before the crime in a local pub. There were no scratches on his face, so it seemed unlikely that after visiting the bar, the man went to the forest at night for a Christmas tree. Eventually, despite the protest, on February 10, 1997, the main suspect was arrested. This was made possible thanks to the appearance of new information. The area around and inside Sophie's house was examined more thoroughly. But nothing was found, but another valuable witness appeared, Julie Thomas. Ian's girl was called in for questioning after the New Year holidays. She was aware of the possible accusations that the police could make against her. And fear made the girl talk. She admitted that the meeting between Ian and Sophie at the store on December 21st did indeed take place. Ian found out about the arrival of the star person and went to stalk her in order to get a sensation. Julie also revealed that on the night of December 22nd to 23rd, Ian was not at home. He returned only in the morning, and his coat was wet, as if he had been outside in the rain for a long time. The girl noticed scratches on his hands and face, but he assured that it was from the Christmas tree. In addition, Julie told how Ian reacted to the news of Sophie's death. He was very nervous, constantly followed the news and tried to find out the details of the investigation. The girl had the impression that he knew more than he let on. These revelations allowed a case to be brought against Ian Bailey. He was charged with the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. The case materials indicated that the man had the opportunity, motive and evidence pointing to his guilt. The suspect's coat was sent for examination, and forensic scientists found microscopic traces of blood on it. A DNA test showed that the blood belonged to the victim. This was a very strong argument against Ian. He himself continued to insist on his innocence and claimed that he was being framed. According to his version, the real killer was still at large, and the police simply decided to hang all the dogs on him to close the case as soon as possible. Ian's lawyers tried to appeal the arrest, referring to the lack of conclusive evidence in violation of the rights of the suspect. They insisted on bail, but the court did not satisfy this request, leaving the man in custody. Further events developed rapidly. Several more witnesses appeared who claimed to have seen Ian Bailey that fateful night near Sophie Toscan's house. Someone heard screams and the barking of dogs coming from there, but no one attached any significance to this, deciding that it was just some kind of quarrel. The investigation also found out that shortly before her death, Sophie repeatedly received anonymous phone calls and threatening letters. She feared for her life and even wanted to hire bodyguards, but did not have time to do so. The woman did not attach much importance to these threats, considering them the intrigues of ill-wishers. Now it became clear that it was not just idle threats. Sophie's relatives insisted that Ian Bailey was involved in this. They were sure that it was he who pursued and intimidated the woman, and in the end he committed a terrible crime. The public followed the development of events with bated breath. The story of the murder of a famous French producer in a quiet Irish town attracted the attention of the media around the world. Journalists besieged the courthouse, trying to get at least some comments from the participants in the process. Ian Bailey himself gave several interviews in which he continued to insist on his innocence. He claimed that he had nothing to do with Sophie Toscan's death and became a victim of a judicial error. The man accused the police of incompetence and bias, claiming that law enforcement officers simply needed someone to blame for the crime. However, despite all of Bailey's attempts to clear his name, the court found the evidence provided by the prosecution sufficient to pass a guilty verdict. Ian Bailey was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. This decision caused a mixed reaction in society. Many were convinced of Bailey's guilt and believed that justice had been served. However, there were also those who doubted the objectivity of the investigation and the court's conclusions. Ian Bailey's lawyers filed an appeal, insisting on a review of the case. They pointed out numerous procedural violations and the inadequacy of the evidence base. In their opinion, the prosecution did not provide irrefutable proof of their client's guilt, and the sentence was based only on indirect evidence and assumptions. This case became one of the most high-profile and controversial in the history of Ireland. It raised many questions about the work of law enforcement agencies, the objectivity of the judicial system and the influence of public opinion on the course of the investigation. Even now, years later, debates about what really happened that December night in 1996 do not subside. Some consider Ian Bailey a murderer who deserved his punishment, while others see him as a victim of a miscarriage of justice and demand a retrial. Anyway, the death of Sophie Toscan du Plantier has become a real tragedy that has left an indelible mark on the lives of many people. This story is a vivid example of how the desire for a bohemian lifestyle, on the one hand, and mental problems and aggression, on the other, can lead to irreparable consequences. The case of the murder of Sophie Toscan once again reminds us of the importance of an impartial and thorough investigation, strict observance of the law and the inadmissibility of hasty conclusions. After all, the price of a miscarriage of justice can be too high, and its consequences will affect the destinies of many people. To this day, the mystery of Sophie Toscan du Plantier's death has not been fully unraveled. We may never know for certain what really happened and who is responsible for this terrible crime. But the memory of this bright and talented woman will forever remain in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.